Hey, what's going on everyone? So a while ago, I purpled Kefka. With his LD and burst having arrived, I was lucky and got his LD. Maybe I'll get his burst too later, we'll see. But if you're interested in what this jester who is not clowning around offers to a team, stick around and find out. Kefka is a full magic attacker who can cover enemies in potent debuffs, enough to take up all 6 buff slots by himself. His skill 1 is Trine, which increases Kefka's bravery, then deals 4 group hits into split HP damage. It inflicts HP attack disable and blind for 2 turns, and when targeting a debuffed enemy, this is improved to Trine Plus, which is stronger and has higher overflow. After use, his brave attack turns into Meteor for 1 use, which does 6 single target hits. His skill 2 is Light of Judgment, again 4 group hits that deal split HP damage. This one debuffs attack, speed, and defense, buffs Kefka's attack, and just like Trine, has a plus version with increased potency and overflow and grants access to Meteor for 1 use. His EX is Havoc Wing, at base 3 single target hits into an HP attack. This deals greater damage to debuff targets and also has a chance to instantly break the target. It extends his own buffs and also applies Sneering Clown to the target, which adds onto the debuffs from Light of Judgment and also has a strong sap effect. After the EX cast, he gets 1 use of Meteor Plus, which is an improved form of Meteor. Going to EX Plus greatly helps out Kefka offensively, and improves his longevity and non-skill damage. Realization improves the chances of Havoc Wing's instant break, adds 50% splash damage and 3 more hits. It also adds an HP hit and Brave Return to Meteor Plus, and improves his Brave attack to have 3 hits. 1 ingot is a stat boost, which is fairly value and also interesting because he actually gets a max bravery boost from his base EX, meaning he gains a lot of bravery he can fill. 2 ingots auto applies Sneering Clown at the start of each wave and grants him a new EX buff in Heartless Angel, which increases his attack, max bravery, and boosts his brave damage done based on the number of debuffs on the target. 3 ingots is very helpful, as it gives Havoc Wing a double cast effect, both with 6 hits, as well as finally giving him a proper HP plus attack. Kefka's LD is Hyperdrive, 12 single target hits that deal 80% splash damage. Using it extends all of his active debuffs by 1 turn, and most interestingly, makes them all framed. Even among other LDs, that effect is pretty dang unique, as it gives Kefka an incredibly high level of buff control, since he can entirely remove an enemy's ability to buff itself as long as the enemy can't do a full cleanse of frame debuffs. This inframing ability is also held by the soon expected Laguna EX Plus, since he can inflict frame versions of his debuffs and then the much later Ferris LD, but Kefka's usage of it is still technically the strongest since he can occupy all 6 buff slots and he can very easily keep the frame debuff active by using his normal skills. The LD passive further raises Kefka's attack. So Kefka was on my bench for quite a while, honestly. I got him way back during Ultimate Leviathan, got a bunch of copies of his EX trying to get Cloud of Darkness, realized him to shuffle some units in low tiers of Dimension's End, and then gave him ingots to finish out Abyss Perfectum. I always knew what sort of power he had since he can just remove all of an enemy's non-frame buffs, but I never really thought I needed him until Abyss, and then getting his LD made the investment all the more worthwhile, although definitely not a strategy I'd recommend for anyone trying to wisely use ingots. While debuffing isn't nearly as prominent a strategy in this game as party buffs and auras, when a character applies ones as debilitating as Kefka does, it does open up a bunch of possibilities with smart play. The main thing against Kefka is that his ability to occupy all debuff slots means that, as you'd imagine, other units can't apply their own debuffs. That's not to say you can't at all pair Kefka with units who need their debuffs to work best, it just means you have to be more careful about the order in which you do things. Say you're working with a lock tank. You'd want to apply their lock debuff first before you put on Kefka's. The lock won't get pushed off by Kefka's generics. Same concept with other unit specific debuffs such as Noxus's point blank warp. As long as you keep the other unit's debuff up, you won't necessarily have to worry about conflict with Kefka. Kefka has yet to have a rerun that gave him an update, so he's expected for at least an LD extension and possibly a rework by the time he comes around again. He's in a bit of a weird position in that he's got such a strong niche as a debuffer that adding a lot more raw offensive power might make him overpowered. However, as a burst unit, it's kinda a no-brainer that'll end up fairly strong overall eventually. So here's some thoughts on what he could get. As much as I want Kefka to get more hits on his skills, 4 is honestly not too bad combined with all the extra effects they have. However, I wouldn't mind seeing the plus forms of both skills get a weakness damage multiplier similar to his EX. even combined with the boost he gets from Heartless Angel. It's a thought to consolidate his debuffs into fewer debuffs, but the thing is that it would actually lessen his ability as a debuffer, since it's the ability to have 6 debuffs as well as inframing them that makes Kefka's spot in the debuffing niche so strong. However, similar to what Gadaj just introduced, it may be an idea to have his LD extension turn all his debuffs into gold frames. That way, they absolutely cannot be dispelled. It'd also make a lot of sense to give it at least one more HP hit, either right in the middle or after 2 or 3 Brave hits. Besides that, similar to what Cloud got in his LD extension, a short duration unique effect that improves HP damage and attack power would also help bring up Kefka's damage output. Lastly, getting a skill regen instead of a free skill after LD cast would help Kefka a decent bit, since in cases where you'll want to inframe all of his buffs, you'll need to cast both first and then the LD, and it wouldn't really make sense to cast one of them again right after. Either that or further extending of the applied debuffs so you don't have to reapply them again so soon. It's honestly kind of hard to think of units to compare Kefka to. The closest in my head is a Metatelian, since they are also pure magic damage and have a lot of enemy buff control, but they lean more supportive and focus more on enemy turn control rather than offensive debilitation. Gabranth, via his multiple debuffs and party buff, do a pretty good job at weakening enemy attacks to a point, but 2 of his debuffs are generic, meaning they can be pushed off with enough enemy buffs. And then, as mentioned earlier, Laguna is able to auto-apply and easily refresh 3 frame debuffs, but again, that's only 3 debuffs. Not to mention, Laguna is a bit of a hard sell, since he's getting his EX Plus right when Lufenia starts. Compared to all of them, Kefka has more debuffs, more debuff control, and also happens to put out really solid damage for his attack type. So yeah, that's Purple Kefka. Even before his LD, Kefka occupied the niche of strong debuffer very well, and with his LD, he basically takes his seat even higher and bolts it to the floor. His LD, in my opinion, doesn't add to his power as an attacker much, but it adds so much to his power as a debuffer that it more than makes up for it along with strong team building. I can only assume that once he gets an LD extension, he'll gain more offensive power to bring him up to modern damage and longevity standards, and in a way, as a burst unit, he's allowed to be a little more OP in what he gets. If you like this breakdown of Kefka's kit and want to see other unit breakdowns or other Opera Omnia content, stick around and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again.